I hope you're all able to enjoy the passing thunderstorm as it quickly rolled by this morning. Now, we're going to get into this topic of what is going on in this world. We live in a world that is a bit different than the one that we, those of us over 50, grew up in. Whereas the news back then was seemingly more objective, with anchors providing the facts with some subtle bias, and reporters actually doing investigative work or reporting. Today's anchors seem to be the major influencers in our society, as the news is controlled and very slanted, dependent upon one's political preference and who owns the media outlet. The investigative reporter, they seem to be few and far between. For instance, never is a pharmaceutical company taken on directly, as they pay the salaries of the media personnel throughout this country. So what do we do about this and lots of other things? Well, if Dr. David Hawkins' conclusions are correct, 86% of the world's population is asleep. 51% in this country. What does this mean? For the United States, it means that 51% of our population is unconscious. Now, interestingly, some people hearing this will immediately think that the 51% that is unconscious is the other side, not them, not me. The typical pointing of fingers away from ourselves so that we feel good by projecting onto others. Now, another way of saying unconscious is non-integrous. 51% of Americans are non-integrous. Being unconscious or asleep or non-integrous does not mean people are oblivious to what's going on in the world or in this country. It does mean, however, that their response will be quite different from the awakened or conscious or integrous person. Again, according to Hawkins' work, if 51% are unconscious, then 49% of Americans are conscious, roughly equal to the divide we currently have in this country politically, and very similar to the divide amongst the vaccine versus non-vaccine groups. Now, we need to be responsive in whatever form, yet integrous. That means being honest with ourselves with respect to that which we know and believe. That means being consistent in our thoughts and actions based on our knowledge and our beliefs. How? We need to proceed in a direction that is guided by light. We could say we need to be enlightened, regardless of what those in current leadership positions are saying or doing. It's without doubt that most, if not every politician, is compromised to some extent. But that does not mean that we must follow the same path of non-integrity. Fighting fire with fire does not make for resolution. Rather, quite the opposite. We have to do something. We have to open our hearts. How do we do this? There are ways, and although each has a slightly different methodology, they all have a universal experience when coming from a higher perspective. The universal experience is love, unconditional love, agape-inspired or God-inspired unconditional love. Now, since 51% of Americans are unconscious, 51% do not know what unconditional love is. Most, if not all of us, know what conditional love is, but that's not love. And we're not going to spend any time on that. One of the expressions of unconditional love is forgiveness. Now, before I proceed further, I need to explain that forgiveness is not forgiving someone for what they have done, but rather forgiving them for what they have not done, as we, the forgiving person, projected our stuff, our wrongness, onto the other in the first place. Okay? By perceiving the world through the lens of forgiveness rather than the ego's judgmental thought system, we express genuine, unconditional love. true love holds no grievances. Grievances block the light that is within us, thereby casting a shadow on our own lives. So if we have a grievance, we have a shadow. Everyone I know has grievances. We have work to do. But let's get back to the politicians for a moment. We love to bash the politicians, and not just them. Two things that can be said about our love for bashing. First, we cannot love an action. We use the word love to describe our passion for something we like a lot, but it is not love. Secondly, anyone who bashes a politician, or anyone else for that matter, is part of the problem, like drugs that have side effects. But that's really not 100% correct either. Anyone who bashes is the problem, not the person you're pointing at that you're bashing. They're the problem, but anyone who bashes is the problem. 100% of the problem. And drugs do not have side effects. They have full-on frontal effects, attacks, if you will, of the physical and mental bodies, just like anyone who bashes another. So if there's anyone out there who thinks they can change the world by putting someone else down, they would be mistaken. To change the world, we must go inside, deep inside, and begin by changing ourself, to be in harmony with ourself. Our ego self must be in harmony with our spiritual self. And it's not going to be harmonious as long as the ego self remains egocentric. And this is not done by pointing fingers. So again, what do? I mentioned grievances before. If we can accept that we make up our grievances against others, then we will at some point realize that we make up our grievances against everyone. We make them up. The darkness we see in some, we see in everyone, because we see it in ourselves. But we don't realize that because we are always projecting our stuff outwardly. At the same time, the light we see in others is also in everyone because it is in us. So Wayne Dyer used to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. All we have to do is change our mind, period. Simple. It is really as simple as that. And yes, I acknowledge that for most people, it will be the most difficult thing you ever do in your life. But in that simple change is a shift in the mind from grievances to miracles. If we insist on remaining in the grievance state of mind, kind of like a New York state of mind, then we will operate from guilt, judgment, and blame. And as long as we remain in the energy field of the ego thought system, we will not receive the answer that would resolve our problems. The problem is in our minds. The solution is there also. But the ego takes the problems in our minds, projects them out into the world, to both people and events, so that we think we see them out there. And we thus focus our attention out there, where the problem is not. Out there in the world. Again, the problem, all problems are in the mind. In the mind. The miracle brings the problem back to the answer, not the other way around. It doesn't bring the answer to the problem, it brings the problem to the answer. That's another subject. But what is the miracle? A change of mind. What is a miracle? Changing the mind. If any of us have ever truly hated someone or something and now truly love that person, in the telling of our story, we may say that the transition from hating to loving was a miracle. So yes, a miracle is changing one's mind. And in doing so, the problem is brought to the answer, analogous to the process of forgiveness, bringing darkness to the light of truth, or to the truth of light. This is the shift that true perception brings. What was projected outwardly is now seen within, and there forgiveness lets it disappear. It is here that illusions are brought to the truth and laid upon our altar. But what is seen outside of us lies beyond forgiveness, and it seems to be out there as someone else's problem, forever in error, giving us a chance to point our fingers at another and feel righteous. But where is the hope in seeing error as outside of ourselves, and thus uncorrectable? What remedy can guilt expect when everything is seen outside of ourselves and, as noted, not correctable? But when the problem is seen within the mind, guilt and forgiveness for an instant lie together, side by side, upon our altar, where we can deal with it. It is at this point forgiveness can occur. The question now becomes, which do we choose, guilt or forgiveness? Which teacher do we choose, ego or spirit? One leads to judgment and blame, the other to peace, joy, and light. Freedom comes from the miracle. Miracles result from choosing the love that is already within us. As we accept this fact, we make ourselves ready to take our rightful place in the divine plan. Our rightful place is actually a state of forgiveness. Remaining in this state allows us to escape from suffering. Think about it. If we remain in a state of forgiveness, no matter what happens in our lives and in life, and things will happen, we won't get mad, we won't get upset, we won't blame others, we won't point our fingers, we won't do any of the stuff that causes upset and hence suffering internally. All that is needed is that we look upon the problem as it is, not the way that we have set it up in our minds, not the way we have exploded it in our heads. In doing this, approaching everything with a forgiving attitude, we recognize that problems are non-existent. That is, they exist only in our mind, not out there, thus rendering them non-existent. So when we get upset or angry and choose to suffer by something out there, we realize quite quickly that we are doing so over nothing, which makes it difficult to justify our reactions. This analogy may help. All problems are the same. Their many forms, therefore, cannot deceive us if we remember this. All problems are the same. Let me explain this further. In the philosophy of A Course in Miracles, the very first miracle principle is there is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same because all expressions of love are maximal. All expressions of love are maximal. Miracles come from love and can only occur when coming from love. Further, miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. Now, what I said a few minutes ago about a miracle is this. A miracle is the changing of one's mind. And what are we changing our mind from? Frustration, disappointment, hurt, anger, envy, emotional immaturity. In other words, suffering. And what are we changing our mind to? Love. So changing our mind with respect to what we consider a small problem, or changing our mind with respect to what we consider a big problem, is no different in reality except between our ears, which, as most of us know, is where the problem normally is. We tend not to look at a problem as it is, but rather we look at it as we make it up and explode it in our heads. But again, all problems are the same. Their many forms cannot deceive us while we remember this. When living a miracle-filled life, nothing is impossible. Something else we can take with us. Since the problem is in the mind, and the solution is also in the mind, then there is no problem. Unless, of course, we wish to continue on in the belief that we need time to reconcile all problems that we allow into our lives. You know, the much used quote, "I need time to work through this." Well, no, we don't. The problem and solution are in one place. The solution is inherent in the problem because the problem never occurred, being that it's in your mind. That is the solution. Another way of looking at it is this way. There are no problems. There are learning situations. And they are either challenges or opportunities or blessings. Your level of awareness determines the viewpoint chosen. The title of today's lesson is What's Going On Here in This World? It should really be What's Going On Here in This Mind? Hopefully, we all see that now and choose to look at problems not as problems, but as real-life classroom lessons that are blessings. That's it for today, everybody. Have a great day and think sunshine, because I prefer that. We've had a lot of rain. Enjoy.